Help at the beginning of the spiritual struggle. Geronda. Does God help more at the beginning of the spiritual struggle? Yes. In the first steps of the spiritual life, man receives much help from God. Just as parents protect their children when they are small. As the children grow, they are not protected as much, because they begin to use their brain. At the beginning of a struggle, man is more aware of the grace of God. Later, God will allow him to struggle and mature on his own. I planted some tomatoes. At first I watered them every day. After that, I left them for a while. When their leaves started to turn yellow, then I watered them. As long as they were not watered, they were forced to send the roots deep to find moisture in the ground. It was during this same time that I produced the first green fruits. If I had watered them continuously, they would have only grown tall and the roots would have remained near the surface. Geronda. You said that man at the beginning of his struggle is more aware of God's grace, and then for a while he is bereft of divine grace. Yes, God removes his grace for man to be humbled and to appreciate God's help. Isn't this change somewhat painful? No, for God does not abandon man entirely. When man begins to work spiritually, then God gives him, let's say, a chocolate. He then slowly starts to learn to work spiritually, eating a little chocolate from God. But when God does not give him chocolate and he stops working spiritually, saying to himself, "At first I was eating chocolate, but now a terrible thing has happened, and I have none," he will not make any progress. In other words, man must rejoice in this and not complain. We must not seek to have Christ's help readily. Let's not expect special dispensations, because then we will be untrained and unrehearsed in the spiritual life. Even in the army, those who are well trained in military tactics survive. When someone is constantly helped and assisted, in the end he is not helped. I am personally moved by the fact that Christ does not help us constantly. I feel as though I am a student and the professors always place demands on their students and have expectations of them. It is difficult to pass the spiritual examinations. It requires constant vigilance and effort. But then, that is how we progress spiritually. Would it be difficult for God to constantly help everyone? No, but then man would not be really helped in this way. A spoiled child whose parents constantly give him chocolates, so he wants them always to be giving him, will become lazy, ill-disposed, and unfortunate. Man, too, will never mature spiritually if he is constantly assisted by God without struggling himself. For this reason, then, God helps man at the beginning of the spiritual life, but then gradually removes himself in order for man to realize that he must do for himself whatever he can. Parents don't always hold a little child by the hand to help it walk. They let it walk by itself for a little and catch it just before it falls. Thus the child learns that its ability is limited to walking by holding on to the handrail. If the child only walks when held by the hand, and when they let it go, it doesn't take hold of the handrail to walk. It little by little becomes strong, but instead sits down. Then it will never learn to walk, simply because it didn't do what it could. Is man aware that at first he had divine help and that later he doesn't? If man doesn't observe himself, he won't be aware of anything.